His eyes begged for trust. Her heart told her to believe. But the evidence told a different story. As the city's most respected criminal attorney, Clara Bennett had defended dozens of impossible cases. But nothing prepared her for Ethan Ward and the mystery behind his ex-fiancée's murder. With each secret revealed, a new truth hides. And when the heart starts speaking louder than reason, even the most dedicated professional might lose sight of the line between justice and love. The sound of Clara's heels echoed through the cold corridors of the state penitentiary. The air felt different that morning, perhaps due to the peculiar look the guard gave her when mentioning her new client's name, or maybe it was just her intuition warning that this wouldn't be an ordinary case. Clara adjusted her navy blue blazer and held her folder more firmly. Despite years of defending criminal cases, she had developed an almost impenetrable professional armor. But something about how the media had massacred Ethan Ward in recent weeks left her uneasy. The heavy metal door opened with a creak. In the small interrogation room, a man sat with his head down, shoulders tense. It wasn't the posture she expected from someone accused of coldly murdering his ex-fiancée, the powerful Rachel Blake. When he raised his gaze, Clara felt her stomach turn. Ethan Ward's eyes were deep blue and carried such genuine sadness that, for a moment, she forgot all the sensationalist headlines. The cold-blooded killer painted by the newspapers wasn't there. There was only a shattered man. Mr. Ward, Clara maintained a professional tone while sitting down. "I'm Clara Bennett, your new lawyer. You shouldn't be here," he said in a hoarse voice, as if he hadn't spoken in days. "No decent lawyer wants to take my case." Something about his vulnerable manner touched Clara. She opened the folder, trying to ignore how those words affected her. "Well, maybe I'm not decent." She allowed a slight smile to form at the corner of her lips. "Or maybe I just believe everyone deserves a fair defense." That's when it happened, something Clara didn't expect. Ethan Ward smiled, a sad and vulnerable smile that didn't reach his eyes, but stirred something inside her in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. "Rachel always said I was terrible at hiding my feelings," he began, his voice breaking. "So you must be able to see in my eyes that I didn't kill her. I love her. Even after everything, I still loved her." Clara knew she should maintain professional distance, focus on the evidence, the facts. But there was something about the way he talked about Rachel, a pain so raw and honest, that made her lower her guard for a moment. "Tell me everything," she said, picking up her pen. "From the beginning." Ethan closed his eyes, as if gathering courage. When he opened them again, they were watery. "Rachel and I met in a coffee shop," he began, his soft voice laden with memories. She was trying to balance a stack of documents, a coffee, and her phone. "I simply caught the papers before they fell." She looked at me with those intense green eyes and smiled. "That's how it started." Clara observed how his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "In the first months, it was like a dream," he continued, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Rachel was intense. In everything. At work, in love, in life. She had a contagious energy for everyone around her. When she entered a room, all heads turned. And for some reason I never fully understood, she chose me." Ethan paused, running his hand over his tired face. Clara noticed the deep dark circles, the worry lines that shouldn't be there in someone so young. But gradually, things began to change. Rachel became more reserved, more distant. There were phone calls she would take in another room, late meetings that became more frequent. I knew something was wrong, but every time I tried to talk, she said it was just work stress. A solitary tear rolled down Ethan's face, and he quickly wiped it away with the back of his hand. Clara realized she had stopped taking notes, completely absorbed in the story. "The last time I saw her alive," his voice faltered. "She was different. Scared maybe. She asked me to trust her, that she was resolving something important. I should have insisted more, should have stayed, but she asked for space, and I respected that." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with contained emotion. Clara realized that before her wasn't just a client, but a man carrying deep and genuine pain. "I'll help you find the truth," she promised, surprising herself with the conviction in her own voice. "No matter what it is." While arranging her notes, Clara tried to ignore the growing sensation that this case would change her life forever. Not just professionally, but in a much deeper and more personal way than she could imagine. With one last look at those haunted blue eyes, she left the interrogation room, her heart racing and mind spinning. Little did she know that, by accepting to defend Ethan Ward, she had embarked on a dangerous journey, not only to uncover the truth behind Rachel Blake's murder, but also to confront her own deepest desires. That same night, after the unsettling first meeting with Ethan, Clara adjusted her reading glasses while examining the case file for the 100th time. The office was quiet at this hour, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional clink of her cold coffee against the porcelain cup. The crime scene photos were spread across the mahogany desk. Rachel Blake's elegant body in her black party dress, lying on the apartment floor. There were no signs of struggle, no break-in. The killer had been someone she knew, someone she trusted. What were you hiding? Clara muttered to herself, studying the victim's face. Even in death, Rachel Blake maintained that aura of mystery that had made her famous in business circles. The phone rang abruptly, making her start. Miss Bennett? The female voice on the other end sounded nervous. This is Melissa Harper. I'm Rachel's best friend. I was... Clara straightened in her chair. Melissa Harper, the prosecution's key witness, whom she still hadn't managed to interview. Miss Harper, thank you for reaching out. Is there something you'd like to share about the case? Not over the phone. Can we meet? There's something about Rachel that nobody knows. Things that might help your client. Of course. Where do you suggest? Café Noir. Tomorrow at 7 a.m. Clara wrote down the address, her mind already racing with possibilities. I'll be there. After hanging up, she looked at the photos again. Something about Melissa's call left her uneasy. Why now? Her eyes fell on the next folder, the transcript of her first meeting with Ethan. His words about Rachel echoed in her mind. The next morning, Clara parked her car across the street from Café Noir. An autumn fog enveloped the city, making everything darker and more mysterious. She watched as Melissa entered the cafe, constantly looking over her shoulder, her movements nervous. Inside, Melissa had chosen a corner table, her beige coat still tightly wrapped around her body despite the cafe's warmth. Miss Harper, Clara approached the table, noticing how the other woman's fingers tightened around the water glass. Thank you for meeting me. Did you come alone? Melissa's voice was soft but carried a hint of anxiety. Yes, as agreed. Clara sat down, placing her bag beside her. Though I admit your call left me curious. What information do you have about Rachel? Melissa leaned forward, lowering her voice. First, I need to know something. Do you believe he did it? Do you believe Ethan killed her? Clara held her gaze firmly. My belief is less important than the truth. What I know is that the evidence seems incomplete. Incomplete, Melissa repeated the word with a bitter smile. Yes, that would be one way to put it. She took a small envelope from her bag. Rachel gave me this the day before she died. Said if anything happened to her, I'd know what to do. Clara's heart quickened as Melissa slid the envelope across the table. And you waited until now to present this? I was afraid. Melissa's eyes darted to the cafe entrance when the bell rang, announcing new customers. Still am. Rachel wasn't just my best friend. She was like a sister to me. We shared everything. She paused, her voice failing. Almost everything. The doorbell rang again. Melissa went pale. He's here, she whispered, her eyes fixed on something behind Clara. My God, he followed me. Clara started to turn, but Melissa's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. Don't look. Take the envelope. Inside, there's a key to a storage unit. What you need to know is there. Melissa was already standing, gathering her things with trembling hands. I never gave you anything. We never met. For both our sakes, please remember that. Before Clara could respond, Melissa was already moving quickly toward the back of the cafe, disappearing through the kitchen doors. Clara sat back down, her heart pounding. The envelope felt heavy in her hands. Through the cafe window, she watched a tall man in a dark suit pass by, his pace unhurried, purposeful. He didn't look inside even once. When she finally opened the envelope, her breath caught. Inside was not just a key, but also a small handwritten note in elegant calligraphy. My dear Melissa, if you're reading this, I failed to stay alive long enough to fix my mistakes. The truth is in Unit 23. But remember, some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. With love, Rachel. Clara stared at the words, a shiver running down her spine despite the cafe's warm air. She pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over Ethan's attorney-client contact number. She needed to see him again, but before she could dial, a text message arrived. It was from an unknown number. Miss Bennett, don't go to that storage unit. It's not safe. Trust me. Clara stared at the enigmatic text message, her heart racing. Who was this mysterious person? And how did they know about the storage unit? Determined to get answers, she quickly paid for her coffee and leave. On the way, she called Detective Martinez, an old friend from the police department. Martinez, I need a favor. Can you check an address for me? It's urgent. 40 minutes later, Clara was standing in front of storage unit 23, Martinez by her side. The detective had a worried expression on his face. Bennett, are you sure you want to do this? My instincts tell me there's something dangerous going on here. That's why you're here, Martinez. I need to know what's in this storage unit. It could be the key to clearing my client. With a resigned sigh, Martinez drew his gun and nodded for Clara to open the padlock. The rusty metal door opened with a sinister creak. Inside, dusty file boxes were stacked against the back wall. On a makeshift table, there was a closed laptop. Clara put on gloves and began searching through the boxes, her heart pounding. Each folder contained corporate documents, printed emails, financial records. Nothing out of the ordinary, until one name caught her attention. Jonathan Kane, the case prosecutor. With trembling hands, Clara picked up the document. It was an email between Kane and Rachel discussing large money transfers. The more she read, the more her stomach churned. My God, Martinez. It looks like Rachel and Kane were involved in something big. Very big. Suddenly, the sound of screeching tires outside made them freeze. Martinez ran to the entrance, gun drawn. Police! Freeze! Shots exploded, ricocheting off the metal walls. Clara ducked behind the boxes, her heart in her throat. She could hear Martinez's shouts, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps. When silence returned, she crawled out. Martinez was down at the entrance, blood trickling from a leg wound. Go, he growled. Take what you can and get out of here. I'll slow them down. Clara grabbed the laptop, stuffed as many folders as she could into her bag, and ran to her car. Her tires squealed on the asphalt as she sped away, her heart pounding. 15 minutes later, she rushed into the penitentiary, demanding to see Ethan immediately. The guard gave her a strange look, but led her to the visiting room. Ethan stood when she entered, concern etched on his face. Clara, what happened? You're as pale as a ghost. Breathless, she told him about the storage unit, the documents, the shooting. Ethan's eyes widened with each revelation. My God, Clara, what did Rachel get into? And now they're after you too. Ethan, I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you know anything about this? Anything at all? He sighed deeply, running his hands through his hair. No, I didn't know anything. I felt something was wrong, but Rachel wouldn't tell me anything. She grabbed Ethan's hand, squeezing it tight. I'm going to find out the truth. I promise. He stared back at her, those deep blue eyes full of fear and hope. Be careful, Clara. If they killed Rachel over this, they won't hesitate to hurt you too. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. Not now that. He stopped himself, but Clara felt the unspoken weight of those words. The bond between them had grown stronger than attorney and client, and that both terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. With one last handshake, she left, more determined than ever to unravel the deadly puzzle she'd gotten herself into. Back at the office, Clara opened the laptop with trembling hands. Folder after folder of documents filled the screen. But it was a single video file, buried in a hidden folder, that caught her attention. Heart racing, Clara double-clicked. The grainy image from a security camera appeared. It showed Rachel sitting nervously in a car. A moment later, a man got into the passenger seat. Clara gasped as she recognized him. Jonathan Kane. Suddenly, a second man appeared at Rachel's window. There was a flash of metal, and Rachel screamed. The camera shook and went black. Clara recoiled, her heart racing, mind spinning. That video was the proof she needed, but it also put her directly in the line of fire. She was about to pick up the phone to call Martinez when a new text message flashed on her cell phone screen. "I see curiosity won over prudence, Miss Bennett. Now that you know the truth, you need to decide what to do with it. But I would warn you not to trust anyone, especially the police. They've been complicit for too long." Clara stared at the message, paranoia growing. Was she completely alone in this fight? How far did this web of corruption extend? With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and dialed the only number she could think of. "David? It's Clara. I think I just became the target." After the disturbing call with David Palmer, the lawyer assists the case, Clara spent the night examining the documents found in the storage unit. Each page revealed more about an elaborate corruption scheme involving Rachel's company. One name appeared repeatedly: Jonathan Cain. The photos showed secret meetings, envelope exchanges, conversations in private restaurants. Cain was in several of them, always in the shadows, always watching. In Rachel's planner, detailed notes of dates, amounts, and coded names. Clara connected the flash drive to her computer with trembling hands. The files confirmed her suspicions. Rachel's company was being used for a massive money laundering operation. And Cain wasn't just the case prosecutor. He was at the center of everything. The phone rang, startling her. It was Martinez from the hospital. "Bennett, you need to know something." His voice was tense. Cain was here. Asked questions about the storage unit. And he wasn't alone. Who was with him? Melissa Harper. Clara felt a shiver down her spine. She returned to the documents, now looking for any mention of Melissa. On the last page of Rachel's planner, she found a note. "MH is not trustworthy. Discovered her true connection to K. If anything happens to me, look for Operation Phoenix files." Clara quickly opened the corresponding folder on the flash drive. Her eyes widened at the information. Melissa wasn't just Rachel's best friend. She had been Cain's informant for years. The phone rang again. It was from Ethan's law firm. "Miss Bennett? This is David. Ethan requested an emergency consultation for first thing tomorrow. Said he has crucial information about Melissa Harper and Jonathan Cain." "What kind of information?" He wouldn't detail over the phone, but he mentioned something about his last conversation with Rachel. Something she revealed about a secret operation. "I'll be there at 7 a.m., she interrupted him. "And Mr. Palmer? Don't tell anyone about this meeting." After hanging up, Clara carefully stored the documents in her safe, keeping only a digital copy of the most important information. While organizing the evidence, one thing became clear. Rachel hadn't been killed by a jealous ex-fiancée. She had been silenced. And now Clara knew why. The question was, how long did she have before they tried to silence her too? The next morning, fog still covered the city when Clara arrived at the penitentiary. She had spent the night reviewing the evidence found in the storage unit, but nothing that directly explained her murder. David Palmer was already waiting in the visiting room. "Miss Bennett, thank you for coming so early," he said, handing her a folder. "Here are the transcripts from the first hearings. Cain is pushing for a quick trial." When Ethan entered, Clara noticed the fatigue on his face. The nights in prison clearly affected him, but there was still that quiet dignity in his gaze that had first caught her attention. "I found something that might help your defense," she began, keeping her tone professional despite how her heart raced when their eyes met. Documents showing Rachel was involved in complex business dealings. She had many potential enemies, but no concrete proof of who killed her. Ethan completed softly. "Not yet, but we have something better, a solid line of defense." Clara opened her folder. "Records show you were at the pier that night, exactly as you said. A security camera from a nearby boat confirms the time." Ethan leaned forward, surprised. "There's actually a recording?" "Yes, and more. I found records of Rachel's calls that night. She received 3 calls after you left the apartment. This contradicts the prosecution's theory about the time of death. Why did lying about being at the pier seem better than telling the truth?" Ethan shook his head, frustrated with himself. "Because you were hurting," Clara answered, her voice softening. "Heartbroken people don't always make the best decisions." Something passed across Ethan's face. Vulnerability, perhaps gratitude. You're the first person who's actually tried to understand, not just judge. Clara felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. She cleared her throat, returning to the documents. Kane built a circumstantial case. Strong, but still circumstantial. With this new evidence and Rachel's history of suspicious business, we can create reasonable doubt. You really believe we can win? I believe in you, she replied before she could stop herself. And I believe in the truth. The silence that followed was charged with something beyond the attorney-client relationship. Clara could feel it, even if she tried to deny it. When all this is over, Ethan finally said, his voice low, "And I'm free. I'd like to thank you properly. Maybe coffee?" Clara knew she should refuse. It was unethical, improper, complicated. Instead, she found herself saying, "Let's first secure your freedom." Then she allowed herself a small smile. "Then we'll talk about coffee." Leaving the penitentiary, Clara tried to focus on the legal strategies she needed to develop, the procedures she should follow. But her mind kept returning to the way Ethan had looked at her, and how, for the first time in years, she was letting her heart question the rules she had always followed so rigidly. On the afternoon before the trial began, Clara paced back and forth in her office, rehearsing her opening statement. The glass walls reflected the sunset, painting the room in amber tones. On the whiteboard, photos and documents were connected by colored lines, telling the story she needed the jury to understand. David Palmer softly knocked on the open door. "Brought coffee. You look like you need it." "Thanks." Clara took the cup, letting the aroma calm her. Kane submitted 3 more last-minute witnesses. Typical of him, Palmer sat down. "But you're prepared. Your line of defense is solid." Clara nodded, her eyes returning to the board. The evidence they found painted a different picture than the one Kane presented. Rachel Blake wasn't just a successful businesswoman. She was involved in complex dealings, some on the edge of legality. She had powerful enemies. "Ethan asked to see you," Palmer said softly. "One last consultation before the trial." Clara hesitated. Eve of trial meetings were common, but after months working on the case, her conversations with Ethan had become increasingly personal, harder to keep strictly professional. "I'll go now," she decided, picking up her folder. The penitentiary was quieter than usual that night. In the consultation room, Ethan looked paler than usual, but there was a calmness in his eyes that surprised her. "You seem nervous," he said when she sat down. "It's not every day that I defend someone that—" She stopped, composing herself. "Such an important case." Ethan's gaze softened. "You never finish that sentence, you know? Always stop halfway, because it would be inappropriate to finish." Clara opened the folder, trying to maintain professionalism. "Tomorrow, Kane will try to paint you as a possessive and obsessive man. He'll use your history with Rachel." "Clara," Ethan gently interrupted. "For a moment, can we not talk about the case?" "We shouldn't." "I know, but tomorrow my life will be in the hands of 12 strangers. And this might be our last conversation if he didn't complete the sentence." Clara felt her heart tighten. "It won't be. I'm going to prove your innocence." "You really believe that, don't you?" There was something in his voice, admiration perhaps. "I believe in you," she answered simply. "Since day one." Ethan extended his hand across the table, stopping inches from hers. "You know what's kept me sane all these months? It wasn't just the hope of proving my innocence. It was—" He hesitated. "It was the way you look at me, like you really see me." Clara knew she should pull her hand away. Instead, she let her fingers lightly brush against his. The contact, though brief, sent an electric current up her arm. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "when the trial begins, I need to be just your lawyer. I can't let this affect how I defend you." "I know." He withdrew his hand, but his eyes remained on hers. "But after all this is over, after," she completed, standing up, "we'll have that conversation about coffee." On her way back to the office, Clara tried to focus on trial strategies, witnesses, evidence. But her hand still tingled where it had touched his, and her heart refused to follow the rules her mind had so clearly established. Tomorrow she would be the impeccable lawyer everyone knew. But tonight, alone in her office with the city glowing outside, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what was growing between them. The courtroom was packed on the first morning of the trial. Clara adjusted her folder at the defense table, aware of the curious looks from the gallery. Ethan, in his freshly pressed navy suit, looked more like the successful businessman he was before prison than a defendant. "All rise," announced the bailiff. "This court is now in session," the Honorable Judge Harrison presiding. Clara observed the jury while Kane made his opening statement. 12 attentive faces, absorbing every word of the prosecutor as he painted Ethan as an obsessed man, unable to accept the end of his relationship with Rachel. "Love can turn into something dark," Kane told the jury, his deep voice echoing through the room. "And when that happens, the consequences can be fatal." When her turn came, Clara rose calmly. She felt Ethan's gaze on her, the quiet confidence that had grown between them over the past months. "Appearances can be deceiving," she began, her voice clear and firm. "The prosecution wants you to see a simple story of love and obsession." But Rachel Blake's life was anything but simple. For 3 hours, she presented the evidence they had discovered: the phone records from the night of the crime, the peer footage confirming Ethan's alibi, the documents showing Rachel's complex business transactions. During the lunch break, Palmer brought coffee for both of them in the small conference room. "You're doing well," he said. "The jury is paying attention." Clara nodded, but her eyes were on Ethan, who was looking out the window. "How are you holding up?" "Trying not to think too much," he replied, turning to her. "Just focusing on your voice." The comment caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Palmer softly cleared his throat. "Kane is calling Melissa Harper as the next witness." Clara straightened up. "This will be the crucial moment. Ethan, remember, don't react, no matter what she says." Back in court, Melissa took the witness stand, her simple beige dress and nervous expression clearly chosen to generate sympathy. "Miss Harper," Kane began, "how long did you know Rachel Blake?" 10 years, Melissa answered softly. "We were like sisters." "And how was she in the weeks before her death?" Scared, Melissa glanced quickly at Ethan. She had broken up with him, but he wouldn't accept it. Called constantly, showed up unannounced. "Objection," Clara stood up. "Speculative." "Overruled," the judge responded. "The witness may continue." For the next hour, Melissa wove a convincing narrative of a possessive and unstable Ethan. Clara could feel the jury being moved by her seemingly sincere testimony. When her turn to cross-examine came, Clara rose slowly. "Miss Harper, you mentioned you were like a sister to Rachel. So close that you surely knew about her business dealings?" "Some of them, yes." Clara picked up a document from her folder. "Then perhaps you can explain why your name appears on suspicious bank transfers from her company?" Melissa's face paled slightly. In the defendant's box, Ethan straightened up. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't know about the 5 transfers of $100,000 each, made to an account in the Cayman Islands in your name? Or the emails discussing a compensation for services rendered?" "Objection." Kane rose. "This has no relevance to the case." "On the contrary," Clara responded calmly. "It goes directly to the witness's credibility and offers an alternative motive for the crime." The judge studied the documents Clara offered. "Objection overruled. The witness must answer." Melissa now looked paler than ever. "I would like to invoke my Fifth Amendment." A murmur ran through the gallery. Clara saw some jurors exchange significant looks. At the end of the day, as the courtroom emptied, Clara began packing her documents. She felt Ethan approach before he spoke. "How did you find out?" he asked quietly. "Doing my job," she answered, allowing herself a small smile. "It's not over, but we shook their theory today." "Clara," his voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Thank you for actually investigating, for not just accepting the obvious story." She finally looked at him, meeting those blue eyes that had become so familiar. That's what happens when you believe in someone. For a moment, they stood there, the silence of the empty courtroom heavy with unspoken words. Then Palmer entered, breaking the moment. "Let's prepare the strategy for tomorrow," he said, seeming not to notice the tension in the air. Clara nodded, returning to gathering her documents. Tomorrow would be another day of battle. But today, she had given the jury their first real doubt. And the way Ethan had looked at her, with that mixture of gratitude and something deeper, made all the work worth it. On the second day of the trial, Kane played his decisive card, forensic investigator Jennifer Torres. Her testimony about Rachel's time of death, between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., directly contradicted Ethan's pure alibi. During the break, Clara reviewed her notes in the conference room. "They're trying to discredit his alibi," Palmer commented. "But they didn't count on this." Clara showed him a document. "Torres has a history with Kane. She always testifies in his favor, always with convenient conclusions." Back in court, Clara exposed the flaws in Torres's analysis, revealing how the air conditioning temperature completely altered the time of death estimate, placing it precisely when Ethan was provably at the pier. At the end of the day, while organizing her documents, Clara felt Ethan approach. "How do you always see what others don't?" he asked softly. "The same way I saw the truth in you from day one." The moment between them was brief, but loaded with meaning. Tomorrow would be the last day of the trial, and although her strategy was solid, Clara couldn't deny that her heart beat faster every time he looked at her that way, as if she weren't just his lawyer, but his salvation. The courtroom was packed for closing arguments. Clara stood up, conscious of the moment's weight. Her gaze briefly met Ethan's before turning to the jury. "The evidence speaks for itself," she began, her voice firm. The prosecution built a story of obsession and revenge, but ignored crucial facts. Mr. Ward's alibi was confirmed. The time of death was questioned, and the key witness, Melissa Harper, invoked the Fifth Amendment when confronted with her own suspicious connections to the victim. During the wait for the verdict, Clara found Ethan in the small conference room. Whatever the outcome, he said softly, "Thank you for really fighting for me." The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. When the verdict was read, not guilty, Clara felt relief wash over the room. Her eyes met Ethan's, who smiled with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and passion. Later, on the courthouse steps, Ethan found her again. "About that coffee we mentioned." Clara smiled. "Tomorrow. After all this media frenzy dies down, tomorrow," he agreed, blue eyes shining with promise. And for the first time since the case began, Clara allowed herself to think not as a lawyer, but as a woman who could finally admit what her heart had known for a long time. 2 weeks after the trial, Clara and Ethan walked side by side on the pier where it all began. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky gold and pink. "I still can't believe it's over," Ethan said, stopping to look at the horizon. "That I'm free." Clara smiled, gently placing her hand over his on the railing. "Believe it. You deserve this second chance." He intertwined his fingers with hers. "Thanks to you. Not just for proving my innocence, but for seeing me when no one else did. I always saw you, Ethan, from that first day in the interrogation room." He turned to face her. "Clara, She softly touched his lips with her fingers. "I know. Me too." And there, with the city glowing behind them and the future stretching ahead, they surrendered to the kiss that had been promised in every look, every touch, every moment of silent understanding. It was the end of a chapter, but the beginning of something even more beautiful, a love story born in darkness, forged in adversity, and sealed in the light of truth. The case may be over, but the mysteries continue. If you enjoyed the story, you won't want to miss the next ones appearing on your screen. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot. See you next time.